Um ex-piloto da CIA afirma que a Lua, na verdade, é uma estação espacial alienígena. E hoje você vai saber tudo sobre isso, com detalhes aqui no Conhecimento Secreto. John Lear, um ex-piloto da CIA, revelou tudo em uma entrevista. As informações dadas por ele são realmente chocantes. Ele afirma que a Lua é uma base secreta extraterrestre e em seu subsolo está cheio de seres e que a própria NASA sabe disso. E ele diz que para manter o sigilo sobre isso é gasto um alto orçamento do programa espacial, com desinformação sobre o assunto, fazendo com que esse tema não seja levado a sério em vários meios de comunicação na internet, ou seja, eles fazem de tudo para que todas as pessoas não acreditem nas informações reveladas. De acordo com especialistas e pesquisadores sobre o assunto, o nosso sistema solar é um importante centro para civilizações em toda a galáxia e a Lua, de certa forma, tornou-se uma enorme estação espacial para diversos seres extraterrestres, e John ainda afirma que eles monitoram tudo o que acontece em nosso planeta. A Lua que conhecemos é uma instalação de monitoramento extraterrestre e é tudo menos natural. As raças extraterrestres estão se escondendo de nós e acompanham a nossa evolução, e sua tecnologia está anos-luz mais avançada que a nossa. Grandes governos como Estados Unidos, Rússia, China e outras superpotências sabem disso, mas não vão esconder por muito tempo. E isso não é tudo. John Lear também mencionou que essa base secreta contém áreas urbanas subterrâneas, onde vivem raças de alienígenas cinzentos, daqueles que estamos acostumados a ver e nos fazer acreditar que são falsos, para que a informação pareça apenas uma fake news. E ele afirma que esses mesmos seres continuam a visitar o nosso planeta até hoje. Segundo o ex-piloto, dentro da base subterrânea, eles possuem um laboratório super avançado, onde realizam experimentos genéticos. John Lear já havia falado sobre esse assunto entre 1980 a 1990, revelando informações confidenciais, mas nessa época as informações não tinham tanta repercussão, pois sabemos que toda a comunicação era dominada pelas grandes mídias, mas hoje qualquer pessoa, assim como você, pode pesquisar livremente sobre esse assunto na internet. Em uma de suas declarações recentes, ele diz que em 1953, uma nave alienígena caiu e um extraterrestre que chamamos de AB-3 foi capturado, e o que ajudou o governo dos Estados Unidos a ampliar sua tecnologia aeroespacial. Em 1962, tínhamos veículos e tecnologias para que as espaçonaves alcançassem grandes velocidades, porém não como a velocidade da luz ou parecido, como os veículos extraterrestres, mas tínhamos uma tecnologia que era o suficiente para que o homem pudesse chegar à Lua em 60 minutos e também em algumas horas em Marte. E esse voo para Marte ocorreu em 1966, declara John Lear. E ele ainda diz que em Marte habitam cerca de 600 milhões de seres extraterrestres e até mesmo algumas colônias humanas. John afirma que tudo que sabemos sobre a Lua é uma grande mentira, pois o que foi descoberto não foi compartilhado com a humanidade e que o propósito disso era apenas esconder suas atividades e programas de avanço tecnológico. E John diz que eles também escondem diversos outros planetas parecidos com o nosso, onde existem vida. E isso também é um tema para um próximo vídeo aqui no canal. Agora nós iremos ver uma das primeiras entrevistas de John Lear, falando um pouco sobre esse assunto.
Hello and welcome to On the Record. Those of you who joined us last week were probably amazed as I was by some of the latest research in the field of UFOs. There is so much to talk about, however, we were unable to fit it all into one program, so my guest again this week is UFO researcher, former state Senate candidate, and award-winning pilot John Lear. Mr. Lear, nice to have you here again.
Always a pleasure to be here, George.
To begin with, we have this concept of the people from other planets as little green men. Are they green from what you know? Are they all the same, or we got different kinds of them?
George, there's at least 70 different species, and probably more. But yes, as odd as it sounds, there are little green men. That's not the ones we usually see, though. We see the little gray ones. They're about 4.5 feet tall. We see the ones that are called the Nordics. They're about 7 feet tall, look like us, but they're invariably blonde hair and blue-eyed. They're one of the species that we have on ice. One of their crashes we recovered.
Obviously, with different species, they have different motives. I mean, are there good aliens and bad aliens?
Good aliens
from what you know?
and bad aliens, and all kinds of ways and reasons for interacting with us.
And what are some of the reasons? Why would they be here?
Genetic experiments, trying to. There's a misconception here. People think that our space brothers would bring us, good things and teach us how to get rid of all our diseases. And if you stop and think about it, that may not be the best thing, because if you had a society without any disease and everybody starts living 150 years, that creates a lot of problems. So they would not meddle in that way.
You believe in part that the movies E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind, were not entirely just the creative products of some Hollywood director, that maybe there's more to that. Why don't you explain?
They were carefully guided by representatives from MJ12, who is this organization that is in charge of the cover-up, in order to get us ready for the release of the information that there are indeed aliens. And in both those movies, they used small little creatures and in order to get us ready for this release of information.
To prepare us that the idea of benevolent aliens from outer space are going to help us out.
Unfortunately, they're not so benevolent. So they made probably one of the most disastrous mistakes when E.T. was put out. At that time was before we discovered what I call the double cross or the grand deception. And they were trying to get us used to the benevolent little creatures, but that isn't the case.
Why don't you take a couple of minutes? Now, you've done as much research on UFOs as just about anyone, I'd imagine, and if you haven't done it, you know people who have. Where did it all start, and how have we put this picture together of where they came from and why they're here?
Well, the whole thing started in July 2nd, 1947. That was the first crash.
First crash of an alien spaceship.
Of an alien spaceship. July 6th is when they recovered it and sent it to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. July 7th is when they held the press conference and told the people it was a weather balloon, which the press bought hook, line, and sinker. September of that year, President Truman established MJ12, and the purpose of that was to study the saucers and cover up the existence of UFOs.
And you say we recovered alien bodies from that incident, right?
4 from that particular crash, yes.
And what'd they do with them?
They autopsied them. Dr. Detlef Bronk was the chief surgeon, so to speak. He was the one that named them EBEs. It stands for extraterrestrial biological entities. And we captured 3 live EBEs. They were numbered in their order of capture: EBE1, EBE2, and EBE3.
Where did we capture? Where did this happen?
In different crashes. EBE1 lived with an Air Force colonel between 1949 and 1952. The EBEs are kept in an electromagnetic facility called a YY-2. It was designed by a Dr. Eric Wang, who worked directly for Dr. Kissinger, who has been in this cover-up since the very beginning. The reason they had to create an electromagnetic facility is the fact that the EBEs are so advanced, they're at least 500 million years advanced from us, and probably more. They can move by thought.
Move by thought.
And they can also disappear. But they can't move by thought through electromagnetic facilities. So they built this facility. There was 2, one in Los Alamos, and one either at Edwards or up at the test site.
At Groom Lake, Nevada.
At Groom Lake. Now there's still one EBE still living, EBE3, and there is a videotape that eventually is going to be released to the public, and it's an interview with him. As hard as that may sound, as hard as that may be to believe, there is a videotape of an interview with EBE3.
And what is this language that the interviewers are?
I haven't seen the tape, so I don't know. But on this trip I told you I took gathering all this information, a guy in Albuquerque handed me 25 secret CIA memos. And if anything can be humorous in all of this, one of these memos, in the body of the text, it said, by the way, EBE3 wants to see the ocean. We better make the arrangements or he'll disappear again. So while he couldn't get out of this facility, he could make himself disappear and cause him a lot of trouble.
Now, can they exist among us? Is that what you're saying, or do they have to have this special environment?
They have special environment, special air. It's my understanding they can only last about 20 minutes in this air.
You were saying also these gray ones are the ones that we see most of the time, and you said that most of that there are a lot of different motives for them being here. The gray ones, what kind of a deal we got going with them? Is that the bunch that you suggest we've made a deal with for military technology?
Well, I think we made a deal with them, and their ultimate, what they want to do is regenerate their own race. Now, apparently, they've either had some kind of nuclear accident, or they're on the backside of a evolutionary genetic curve, and they're going downhill instead of uphill. In other words, in the autopsies, of which I have 2, we found out that their digestive system is atrophied. They can't eat through their mouth anymore. You know how they eat? Well, these cattle mutilations, they take the hormones and the enzymes from those cattle and they spread it on their skin. And their skin absorbs the nutrients and then excretes the waste back through their skin. And if you read Whitley Strieber's book or listen to him talk, he talks about when he's seen them doing this to their skin, and they're scraping the waste off.
Now, these cattle mutilations, there's been a film made about that, and perhaps in a couple of minutes we can take a look at some excerpts of that.
Yeah, Strange Harvest was a good one, but another thing that happened here on March 4th, there was a documentary released on the best UFO photos that have been taken so far, including 1 minute and 38 seconds of videotape. Now, what happened is in November, this guy took these photos, took it into the TV station. They thought it was great, but nobody would believe it. So they spent 3 months checking the validity of the, authenticating the videotape and checking out the credibility of the witness. And when they had it all down, they put out this documentary, 30 minutes. I mean, it's ironclad. They're here. But do you think it got on the network? No, it was just showed locally in Pensacola.
We have some of that, and perhaps when we come back, we can take a look at it. So stay with us for more of On the Record. Welcome back to On the Record. My guest again this week is UFO researcher John Lear. John, you say this documentary was put together in Florida recently, and it's some pretty stunning stuff.
Pensacola, Florida, and they've had all kinds of physicists and scientists look at the film. It's absolutely authentic. There is nothing fraudulent about it, and it's really interesting. I just can't understand. Well, I can't understand why the networks didn't pick it up, because each one is controlled by a member of MJ-12.
That's quite a claim, but we're going to take a look at the film now and see if it's worth suppressing.
Things were very normal around the house. Just a normal evening. My wife says she's got to run to the store. Anyway, I'm sitting at my desk. Out the window, I noticed something, a glow. I got up and walked around outside and looked. It just didn't look like a helicopter or an airplane. I realized that it was not something normal. I thought of calling the police, and I said, well, I better take a picture first. I had no feelings I was going to be, hurt or anything. I took 4 shots and ran out of film, and again in my mind, take some more pictures. I ran back in, took the last package of Polaroid film out, opened up and crammed it in there, because the thing's flying around out there, get it quick. It either saw me or whatever, because it started coming. It altered its course. It started coming my direction.
That was November 11th, 1987, about 6 o'clock in the evening. A Gulf Breeze resident who insists on remaining anonymous took these photographs. Charlie and Doris Summerby say they saw the same thing that night over East Bay.
And suddenly, Dory said, look, what's that, Charlie? How be that? There were portholes. We saw portholes of light coming out of the portholes.
And over the next 3 months, many more pictures would be taken. By different people. And videotapes, too.
And I feel that there's absolutely no sign of a hoax, that the photographs are genuine, that the witnesses are telling the truth, and that this presents probably the best without any doubt, the best photographic evidence in 40 years of UFO investigation.
As this series goes on, we see a lot more of that videotape evidence.
Yeah, there's a minute and 38 seconds of it. It's
pretty interesting stuff. We've never seen that before, have we?
It's great. And on one morning, he goes out with his camera, and 3 of them show up, and he has a spectacular shot of 3 of them. And on one of the shots, they tip the saucer so that they can see up in the inside in the bright glowing ring of however it's powered.
Take it that's not a weather balloon. The government wouldn't contend it's a weather balloon.
No, that's for sure.
How does the government explain this, or has anyone ever put the question to them?
Nobody's put the question to them because they've still got their stock response is the Air Force quit investigating UFOs in 1969.
What do you suppose that bunch wanted? They knew pictures were being taken of them. Why were they hanging around there?
It's got something to do with what's going on now, and I can't even fathom what's going on. But it shouldn't be too long before we find out.
A lot of stuff has happened in the interim between July 1947 and that incident we just saw. You were going to bring us up to date on.
I was going to tell you that a lot of Air Force pilots and planes have been, the pilots have been killed and the planes destroyed. The first one was the Thomas Mantell crash, January 7th, 1948. He was in a P-51 and he was chasing a flying saucer, ordered to chase one, and he got up to it and said, "Oh my God, it's huge," and that's the last thing they heard of him. 1948 was the second crash of a flying saucer near Aztec, New Mexico. 1950 was the third crash near Laredo, Texas, about 30 miles inside the Mexican border. 1952, we had 2 weekends in a row where the UFOs flew over the Capitol, Washington, D.C., buzzed the White House. Despite pictures and radar confirmations of the objects, the Air Force said it was a temperature inversion.
Now, did this ever make the newspaper back in 52?
It made all the newspapers, but it's been such a fantastic mental programming that we've been forced to forget this. It was in the papers. It was one of the most spectacular UFO events in history. 2 weekends in a row.
In the newspapers, I don't know if you've gone back and looked at the newspapers from that era, but how did the newspaper people explain what it was?
They told the Air Force line it was temperature inversion, but they had pictures of them. And it was just said it was temperature inversion.
And what happened after that? What's next?
The government established an intensive program of ridicule against anyone who said they saw flying saucers. And fear of ridicule was the foundation on which the cover-up was placed. Nobody likes to be ridiculed. And they built that fear into anybody so that nobody would talk about it. 1952, Eisenhower was elected. He was briefed by Hillenkotter. Eisenhower, being military, took steps to ensure that the secret was kept. Because of his military background, he made it more military-oriented than, say, a civilian president would have. And it's this, I think, that has let his actions let the real power of the executive office slip through the hands of the president into MJ-12.
E se você gostou desse vídeo, curta, se inscreva e ative o sininho para receber todas as notificações sobre os próximos vídeos, pois só aqui você fica por dentro de todo o conhecimento secreto que existe no nosso mundo e também de fora dele.